finding a little break in the weather here to do some harvesting at Ivywood. I've been keeping an eye on these gorgeous Verbascum thapsus mullein leaves to try and find a dry day to do some harvesting to make tincture with this leaf. This Verbascum thapsus is obviously in its first year. It's a biennial plant. So in its first year, it'll have these massive, big, fluffy leaves, which we make medicines with. And then in the second year, it's going to send up the big flower spike with the gorgeous yellow flowers that everyone recognizes. And we make other medicines with the flowers in the second year. So this gorgeous Verbascum thapsus is an amazing herb for respiratory issues. I wouldn't be without it in Ireland, where it is really damp and everybody is prone to respiratory conditions. But luckily we have tons of respiratory herbs here, or herbs that act on the respiratory system. This plant is anti-spasmodic and antitussive for coughs. It's also an expectorant, so it helps clear lots of phlegm. And it's also a nice anticatarrhal as well, so another way it kind of clears phlegm. But it's also quite astringent and emulsant at the same time. So a lot of herbs in herb medicine are like that. But it's also a yin tonic, so all this lovely softening can be employed as a yin tonic for a whole range of conditions. But certainly when I think of respiratory conditions, treating them in clinical practice, mullein is one of our top herbs, and I haven't made mullein tincture with the leaves for about 2 years, so I'm running low, and so I'm desperate to get out here on a dry evening like tonight and harvest some of the leaves. Some of the things we really like to combine mullein with in clinical practice are things like this Althea leaf. So with that gorgeous demulcent action, it's really useful for sore throats and hoarseness. And I'm talking about extreme, like inflamed, raw, sore throats. And this gorgeous Althea leaf, which is your marshmallow leaf, is a really excellent thing to combine it with. And even for that nice demulcent action, plantain. So we always make glycerite from plantain. So another lovely wild plant can be really nice in combination with mullein, often combine those two. But in terms of really more deep-seated issues that are bacterial or viral respiratory infections, there's tons of other plants that it's really useful with, because with some of those infections you might have this, you might get a coldness, you might have this quite a lot of mucus and phlegm that has to be released, and even some really deep-seated conditions like emphysema. Mullein is one of the top plants that can really be helpful there. And for people who have quite damaged bronchi because of smoking, again, mullein is really useful for helping the mucous membranes of their whole respiratory tract. So that's where it brings such healing as a demulcent and an astringent as well, acts on the mucous membranes there. But some of the other things we like to combine it with, if there is like a lot of infection and it's a really deep-seated like bronchitis, it's one of the top herbs for bronchitis, are things like your licorice. This is just a little baby licorice from the nursery. So this licorice is only about 3 or 4 weeks old, a tiny guy. Or other nice things like this Scutellaria biacalensis, which is your bical skullcap, which I did a really short little video on it, and all its amazing immune aspects. Or your classic kind of immune things, your echinacea. So there's some echinacea purpurea growing here next to me, and this one I'm holding here is another echinacea that we grow, Echinacea pallida, which has a very different flower actually, so quite nice. So yeah, the flowering head or the root combines really well with mullein leaf. And then another plant people may recognize is elecampane, which is your Inula helenium. This is just a little bit of one in flower, but it's the root that is an extremely important respiratory herb. And in combination with mullein leaf, it's incredible. It's really incredible. And then a couple of other things. I was just grabbing things from around the garden, like your astragalus again. Most people have heard of astragalus. This is just one I just cut from the garden over there. It's the root again of astragalus that we use, again in combination with mullein for respiratory infections, and this is obviously an amazing immune modulant, and that's why we combine it with that. And then other nice things that are really good for that mucus or other infections of the throat and the chest, or things like your angelica root, love angelica root as well, or your marubium. This is white horehound, and we grow white horehound and botany, we're black horehound, so both of them combine well. And then maybe just one of the last things to mention about mullein in terms of its antispasmodic and antitussive value is for asthma. So not just bronchitis and emphysema, where you get that cough and there's breathing issues, but also asthma. So for asthma, it's a bigger picture, but some of the herbs that you might prescribe to someone in clinical practice are your mullein leaf again, and lovely things like this grindelia here, which I just nabbed one out of the nursery there, and there's some bigger grindelias growing over there. This is a big plant, and we harvest the flowering heads, and it's got this really sticky resin on it. Or things like this wild plant. This is tussalago, which most people would recognize. So we use the flowers and also the leaf. So these two leaves are quite similar in some ways, also demulcent, highly antitussive, so for that cough, that persistent cough. And there's a number of other things that we use, but I just wanted to mention a few things that we combine this mullein with. I'm just thinking about them at the moment while I'm about to harvest some of this mullein while it's still dry, and create some tincture with it tonight here at Ivywood.